The music playing in the background is called I Wish You Enough by Jeff Brisbane. Jeff Brisbane has honored us with being able to play this introduction. We wish you enough as you go through life, as you avoid the maze, or maybe choose to walk into walls and learn what's good for you and what's not. I've hit my head on walls many, many times in my life, but the best part of that is I learned from my mistakes. Today, I have Carol Chapman with us, and I met Carol through podmatch.com. And for those of you listening, if you have a story that you want to share, if you want to listen to some great podcasts, check out podmatch.com. You will find most of us there recording with each other and sharing information that just might make you say, aha, that sounds like me. So, Carol Chapman, you had a very successful corporate career, and a lot of us have worked in corporate America, and many of us really thought that that's exactly where we wanted to be. And I really believe that someday my coworkers would find me underneath my desk because I had worked so hard and worked so long that that is where my life ended. But I'm so glad that was not my journey. So tell us a little bit about your journey in corporate America and what you're doing today.
I would love to. And thank you so much, Karen, for inviting me on your show. It's such a pleasure to be here. And like so many others who take that same path, I will have to say that I wouldn't change it. I learned a lot from it, but I reached a point where it was no longer for me. And there were times, there were things in my life and emotions that were surfacing that I wasn't recognizing. I knew that they were there, but let's put it this way, I was in denial. And I probably should have left corporate much sooner, but there was a reason why I was there. But there was one really defining moment in my life that started me on that path. And of course, as you know, our paths are always very windy, and mine wound a lot of different ways. But when I was in first grade, I was living abroad. My father was in the Air Force, and I was going to school. Of course, I was going to school, but that was a very traumatic experience for me. And the reason I say that is that it was at such an early age that the first and only time I was ever bullied. And I was bullied by a teacher, my first grade teacher. And of course, first grade teachers are supposed to be role models,
Right.
and supposed to be helpful, not hurtful. And it was a very difficult time for me. But really, to make a long story short, I had a hearing problem, but they didn't know it at the time. Every time I would get tested, I would test fine. But this teacher made me feel so stupid and belittled me at every opportunity. And that when that occurred, it morphed into something even more, where I started just, creating stories in my head and feeling so fearful. And it even reached a point where I would actually feel sick and, pretend that I was sick because I didn't want to go to school, but I actually make myself sick because of the terror that I felt, the fear that I felt. And it really hit a boiling point one day when she left the room, and she said, do work on your assignment. And I don't want anyone, to leave the room. Just, do what you're supposed to do and don't talk. And so she left the room, and it seemed like forever and ever that she just didn't come back. And I really had to pee. I had to go to the bathroom so bad, but I was paralyzed. I could not move. And I knew that if I left, she would definitely come back, and then I would just be chastised. I
Sure.
mean, so um, I ended up peeing in my pants, and it fell all over the floor, and I was just mortified. And so that experience, it turns out I came back to the US and they found out I had a hearing problem. Fortunately, I had my tonsils and adenoids removed, and that corrected the problem, but I almost went deaf. But from that point forward, I was bound and determined to prove that I was not stupid, that I was smart enough, that I was good enough, and that I was not stupid. And it took a long time. It took, 2 3 years to pull my grades up, and I was just I became so achievement oriented that I did everything I possibly could to demonstrate that I was
Sure.
smart. So I was the first in my family to graduate from college. So I set high standards for myself, and I found my jumping point into business was just dive right in to the corporate world, and I did. And I had several different opportunities over the years, but I ended up my last role, and I've been there for about 12 years was with Intercontinental Hotels Group, which was just a fabulous company to work for. It's just so much fun being in the hospitality industry and hotels in particular. But I found myself, you know, looking to prove to everyone else externally. I wasn't really listening to what was really inside me and what was important to me. And so over time, I just worked my way up the corporate ladder, and I worked myself to exhaustion. And I reached a point. I was living abroad. I was as an expat. I was head of human resources for Asia Pacific, traveling all over the place. And I reached the point where it became so bureaucratic. When you're in um, corporate, there's a lot of politics,
Right.
and the higher you get, the more politics you have to deal with. And so it just became very difficult to continue in the role. And I reached a point after 23 years. It's like, I think I've had enough. Even though I've seen the world, I've done everything I wanted to do in corporate. There's got to be something else. And so there was something else calling within me, and it was screaming, and it was my heart. My heart was actually screaming at me, because the mind kept uh, the mind is the ego,
Right.
basically, and it kept shutting down the heart. And so finally my heart broke through one day, and I just said, I got to get out of here. But it didn't happen that fast. I worked another 5 months, and I worked and negotiated a very nice severance package, and ended up coming back to the US, um, and starting a whole new life. And then 2 months later, I suffered a brain aneurysm. So, and again,
Wow.
yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
I had lots of things in between them, but the brain aneurysm was something that was, it was a good thing that I made the decision to leave, because I could have been somewhere in the farthest reaches of China, not having access quickly enough to the right medical
Sure.
facilities. So I was very fortunate in that respect to get back to the US. But again, I was very lucky too with the aneurysm. I was in ICU for 14 days, and they had to actually go in and do surgery. But fortunately, it was a slow bleed, and I didn't. The only thing I really suffered was fatigue, but that was a huge wake up call. It was a gift in some respects, because it really made me understand how life is so precious, and we can't wait to follow our dreams, our
Right.
deepest desires, and what our heart is telling us. We have to listen. And so it's at that point I really started listening to my heart. And so I wanted to move into more of an entrepreneurial um, you know direction of my life, and help others. And so I started a consulting business, and then I ended up partnering with another gal, and we ended up creating a business that helped organizations build their brands from the inside out. And again, looking, still following my heart. But in over 8 years, we built that business, and then I ended up just needing to move on because again, I was following my heart, what I needed to do. And then, long story short, just getting, moving fast forward, a couple of other ventures. And then finally, I just decided I really love personal development. I love helping others. And I had uh, been a coach. I got certified as a coach years prior to that, but I had never really used it. And so I wanted to apply that. And then I just wanted to do things in a different way. And I really wanted to help others really tap into their heart center and live a heart centered life. And that's where I'm at right now. I'm helping others to discover the inner, the inner planes within
Right.
them, to expand their awareness and to master, and break those negative habits, those patterns that don't serve us, and help people lead with the heart, lead with love, and allow the mind to serve us, the ego to serve the heart. So that's the journey that I'm on right now.
Well, and I have to tell you, I'm sure there are people who are listening to this. They're saying, well, you know, Carol just got lucky. She just, she had support, or she found the right job, or she got the right degree, and she made these changes. And the reality of it is, and I was one of those people probably 15 years ago that would have said that, until I realized that, wait a second, it's up to us. Like you said, listening to your heart. If you're waking up every day and you're going through the motions, and you're convincing yourself, I like what I'm doing, or everything's okay, that takes a lot of energy. It's when you do what makes you feel good, and it comes from within. It's not making you feel good from the outside. And I love the fact that you were able to do numerous transitions. And for those people who are sitting out there and saying, yeah, but I just can't leave my job, or I don't have a great job, I'm not making enough money to be able to do, you know what? Do you have an extra hour each week to do what you really love to do? Because if you do, you might be able to grow that. But you have to have a purpose, and you have to want to do it. And that's what I see in you. You had a purpose. You were going to make sure that you felt good at the end of that day. And
Absolutely. Absolutely. And like I said, it was a windy path. And actually that aneurysm was a wake-up call, but it was an
right,
even bigger wake-up call because I started seeing, feeling, experiencing the world differently. I had always been into meditation, into spending time in stillness and getting quiet. But there was a time when I was in corporate life, things were so fast paced that you lose sight of that, you lose track of it, and you lose that the touch with the inner. But I started seeing and experiencing things differently. And it was difficult to even share it with other people because, everyone else is just so externally focused. But I wasn't. I was starting to really focus on working on myself, working on who I was, what I wanted to be, and knowing that each and every day something new is unfolding and evolving within me. And that's what we need to honor, is that purpose is not just, it's not just out there. Purpose is here, and we live it each and every day, and it evolves. It changes within us as we evolve. And so it's important to honor that.
so this morning I did another interview podcast with a woman who lives in Sweden. And typically, you know, you might think, well, Sweden, there's a big difference. Culture is different. They're on the other side of the world. They have more darkness. And um, within 30 seconds of just introducing ourselves to each other, we were on the same plane. And was like, oh my gosh, this is why I do this, because we can all find a little bit of ourselves in someone else. And it's not that we have to mimic what the other person's doing, but to become mindful of what our opportunities are in this world. And especially now, um, since the pandemic, so many of us have learned that we can live in a virtual world. It's still nice to live in reality, but for many of us, living in a virtual world means that we can grow in a different way that we never did before. Um, I have people who say to me, do you ever leave your studio? You seem to always be recording. And I said, I meet more interesting people through Zoom, I'm sorry, than I do in the grocery store. In the grocery store, everybody's in a hurry and they want to grab something off the shelf because it's the last one. But in these conversations, we're learning, that our soul has so much to do with who we are. And so many of us forgot that when we were growing up because we were so focused. So I'm going to take you back to being that little girl in the classroom, because I wasn't bullied by my teachers, but I remember having a few accidents in the classroom and how humiliating that is, because back in my day going to school, you were expected to hold it till bathroom break. It's not like in today's classrooms when kids are getting up and just going to the bathroom because they got to go or they just want to get out of the classroom. Um, and I can't imagine how terrible that was for you as a young child. Were you able to express it to your family at all or to anybody else at the school?
Oh, absolutely. And the I think the one thing that was really, really helpful was I had a brother that was 4 years old, and he would walk me to class and walk me, home from class. And of course, I got belittled for that. Hey, your big brother's got to, take care of you. But my brother was extremely understanding. My parents were very understanding, and and there were times my mother would let me stay home from school, but they didn't realize the extent of the trauma because I didn't really share it because as much because I was really ashamed. There was a certain amount of shame that being why I felt singled out,
Sure.
and I felt that if I were to really share this, my mother knew something was wrong. Um, and they couldn't quite figure it out. And it really wasn't until I got back to the States where we realized that it was a hearing problem. And, if you can't hear, you're not able to really take in information and process it properly. And then of course, just the fear that continued to build. I mean, I'm surprised I didn't have a breakdown then. But as kids, we're resilient. But each event like that builds over time, and it leads to our conditioning over time. Our belief system leads to limiting beliefs about ourselves, how we view the world, how we view ourselves. And I had very low self-esteem for a long time, but I was still, there was something in me. There was an inner strength that moved me forward. And when I finally had my hearing corrected and I could hear properly, I saw the opportunities, and I was able to apply myself in a different way. in a normal way.
Sure.
And I started to see results. And because of those results, again, it was still externally focused. It wasn't so much internally focused. And I think that's where we lose track of who we are, because we're always, as we're growing up and we're having the experiences, and you have the peer pressure, you have the parents telling you this and that, and you have society saying this or that, and then we learn these patterns over time. And then when you put on top of that all the self-limiting beliefs through the negative experiences that you've really lost touch with who you really are
Absolutely.
as a sentient being, and then we begin to live our lives in a way that we're trying to please others, and we put on this persona, this mask. And we have to just be willing to let the mask, drop the mask, and really be true to who we are. And that's what I love about this podcast, is that you bring on so many different people from different walks of life, and you allow them to share their stories. But really at the core of all of it, it is about being true to who you are, and sharing your vulnerabilities, but at the same time sharing those challenges, and how you have overcome those challenges and helped yourself, and in some respects helped others.
Well, it's interesting. I didn't have a problem with my hearing when I was young. Um, but about 15 years ago, they found a very small tumor in my left ear, and they said we need to go in and take it out and do some reconstruction of the ear, and made it sound like, hey, it's no big deal. And so I went along with it. I said, okay. Didn't realize I was losing any hearing. But the meantime, the doctor started on the wrong ear, and so damaged my right ear. When he went into my left ear, um, he didn't really look at the whole tumor, so he didn't take it all out. Now, luckily, it was benign, but he left part of it in there. Needless to say, after recovering from surgery, um, I had hearing loss. And it was my wonderful, not surgeon, but ENT who said to me, Karen, you need hearing aids. And I was like, oh no, I'm too young for it. I'm working in a very young industry. No, I can't wear hearing aids. And I fought him for about 30 days when I realized I wasn't hearing. Um, so I got hearing aids, um, and I'm very adamant about wearing them and making sure they're right and upgrading them and everything else. But in the beginning, probably for, 5 years, maybe a little longer, I wouldn't let anybody know I was wearing them. Made sure my hair covered them, and if they were going to squeal, I turned them down before that would happen. And then one day I just said, no, this is who I am now, and it's okay. And if I have a problem hearing you, because hearing aids only aid your hearing, they don't give you that normal hearing back. I said, maybe it will help somebody else. Maybe somebody else will realize they're having difficulty hearing, or maybe they don't speak clearly. And so I use this as my platform to be able to share. And the interesting part was I started doing studies and found out how many young children today have hearing issues. Hearing issues are not just for those of us who get older. And that is just one of the many reasons we do this podcast, because when you tell your story and we can feed off each other, it sounds normal, natural, and maybe that person listening can say, oh, I'm not alone.
No, exactly. We're all human. We all have experiences that all of us can relate to, similar experiences. And I think we find that there's more in common that we all have than that is not in common. And
Absolutely.
that is the beauty of sharing and connecting. And I'm so glad that you shared that experience, because that is something that you have to live with for the rest of your life. But I would imagine that out of that adversity, you have found opportunity.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, and not putting my husband down. So I want the audience to know this, but he's probably the only one who has difficulty communicating with me because he he sees me so active. He forgets that I'm wearing hearing aids and he's expecting them to be perfect. And so when I say, "What did you say?" or "Your voice dropped," it's typically it's no, it didn't. Um, but the reality of it is I'm learning about that. And when I see it in other people doing that with their loved ones or their coworkers, um, typically I'll just step in and say, I want you to understand, okay? They're not trying to annoy you by asking over and over again, what'd you say? They're trying to let you know that this is where their threshold is. And I think that's about anything that we do in life, that if we can be aware of what that other person has experienced. And I'm not saying hang out all of our dirty laundry, okay? But if we don't understand it, how can we communicate?
Absolutely. And I think it's most important for each of us to watch our own thoughts and observe our own thoughts, observe what is going on inside us, particularly as we are talking, because, we're constantly chattering to
Right,
ourselves. And hopefully, and for most people, it's a lot of negative chatter. But we really want to work towards not having that negative chatter, all that self-referential, stuff going on in our heads, and help others. So it really is about, as we are connecting and we are sharing with one another, it's having that, being able to relate, being able to have that compassion, being able to interact with an open heart, to be able to share that experience and be together in our vulnerabilities, because in our vulnerabilities is where we find that connection. Because as humans, most of us really want to help one another. We don't want to hurt one another.
right.
But what happens is the freaking ego, gets in the way. And that's why we have so many issues that we're dealing with today, because there's this huge ego force that is alive and active within the world. I don't know where I'm going with this, but
That's okay.
it just, but to help others understand that being more compassionate and understanding, it takes practice. It takes practice. Even just operating from our heart takes practice. And the more that you do it, the more that you will be compassionate, understanding, patient, flexible. You'll be happier. You'll be freer. But when we're not operating within our heart, what happens is that heart starts to close up, and we're just constantly in the mind, and the mind is always going to protect you. So you're always going to be more critical, more negative, less compassionate, less patient with others. And it's so important for us to pay attention to the inner dialogue and what is happening within ourselves, and to take opportunities like you have with, and me, the things that we have been through, and to see the opportunities rather than the negative with it, and to focus on that.
Well, and I do believe that the generation that I come from, we were taught, if you work hard, you'll be rewarded. Everything's going to be okay. Someday you're going to retire. You're going to have a pension, a gold watch, all these things. Now, if I look at my parents' life, that didn't happen for them either. Okay. But my parents were always looking to, okay, how can I get this better? How can I keep going? And they did. Um, and so I learned that from them, that I may not, you know, get that promotion, get that better salary, move on to another company that's going to want me even more. Um, and at times, yeah, I did say to myself, what's wrong with me? Why can't I get ahead? And just as I would say that, I would think of something that maybe I could do that would get me ahead in some way. And so over the years, um, I started support groups. I had some small businesses. Um, and when I ended those tasks, I had the people around me saying, I guess you didn't succeed. And in the beginning, I agreed with them. But it took me a while to say, no, I did succeed because I got what I needed out of it. And maybe I touched one other person. I can't be expected to do much more than that. And so I say to our listeners, you know, you've got to, it's like Carol said, you've got to feel that heart. You got to feel the heartbeat and know where it's going. Um, and the voices in our heads, we all have them. It's not just the cartoon characters.
Right. And the best way to really listen to your heart is to get quiet, be still. And what happens is when we start to be still, things, and over time, we start to calm down, and that starts to calm down, and we can listen to that voice within. So it's just taking the opportunity to get quiet, because if we're not doing that, then the mind is always going to be at work and it's always going to be in the driver's seat. So you want the mind to take a back seat and listen to your heart and allow the mind to serve, because in some respects the mind is very, very beneficial for us. It solves problems, it helps us live our everyday life. We need the ego to move us forward
Sure.
and take action and get things going, but we can't let it drive everything, because it wants to protect us at all costs. And so it wants to if it's fearful or afraid or anxious, it wants to protect us from all of that. So it's important to take the time to get quiet. And once you get quiet, that's when you really start to listen to your heart. And the more that you do that, the more that you can operate within your heart and follow that as an internal guidance system for you, and give you the opportunity to put the heart in the driver's seat, because the heart never lies. The heart is always right. It's what's right for us. And what happens is the mind is fixated on what everyone else thinks, because it's trying to protect you. But the heart is it knows what's best for you.
I love that. Well, I have to thank you for being on with us and sharing this, but how can our listeners find you? Because one of the things I say today is, Zoom brings us close together. And when you find somebody who's out there coaching, and they don't have to be in your own backyard anymore, we can work with people that are going to help guide us. And that's what a coach does. So how can our listeners find you?
Well, they can find us at heartsriseup.com, HEARTS, rise, RISE, up, UP.com. Also, we have a free meditation, Access Your Inner Wisdom, which will give you, it's a guided meditation, and it will give you the opportunity to tap into your heart center and tap into listen to your heart and what your inner wisdom is sharing with you. which is it's a great meditation. So they can find us at heartsriseup.com. And on that homepage, if you scroll down a little bit, you'll see the Access Your Inner Wisdom meditation.
How wonderful. And for those of you listening, if you said, oh, I already forgot it, don't worry. It's in the show notes. So there's no excuse, because I know we all make excuses to make changes in our life. And if you're thinking that you need to do something, start talking about it, start feeling it, start trying to, do it in baby steps. As I told somebody today, for the last year, due to health reasons, I put on weight. And when you look at my catalog of food and exercise, my doctors are scratching their heads and going, there's no way, did you lie in this? And I said, no. And you can ask my husband, and they said to me, well, you need to try something else. So I went out publicly today and said, okay, everybody, I'm on Weight Watchers points. A number of you have done it. Okay, I need that support. And what I want people to know is that when I filled it out, I didn't look at it and say, oh, in 1 month, I have to lose 20 pounds. What I said was, in 1 year, I need to lose 40 pounds or feel healthier. And if healthier is the answer, that is wonderful for me. So take those baby steps, listen to your heart, and please follow Carol Chapman, because she has a lot of great information to share with you. And we all need some inspiration. And I think that's what you gave us today, Carol.
Thank you so much. It's been a
Thank you.
pleasure.
Have a great day now.
All right, you
Bye-bye.
too. Bye-bye.